Hey there, team, and welcome back. My name is Tiffany Kennedy of the Intelligent Project Manager LLC. And in today's session, I want to discuss workflows, what they are, how to define them, and how to integrate them into your processes. Let's start by understanding what workflows are and why it's important to map them out before bringing technology into the equation. So, in plain terms, a workflow is a series of steps or a set of instructions that outline how you get from point A to point B. It essentially tells us how a particular task or how a deliverable should be managed and then worked through to completion. So, imagine if you're baking a cake. The workflow would include all of the steps from gathering ingredients, mixing them together, baking the cake, decorating it, and finally serving it. That's what gets us from the point of ideation, which is, hey, I want to bake a cake, through down to the point of serving it and eating it. And then that's what I'm going to call complete. Each step in the process is essential. And following that workflow ensures that you don't miss any important details and that the cake turns out to be something that we actually want to eat. So, in work or in a business context, workflows can be much more complex and involve a multitude of people, departments, even software. But when you boil it down, even at the core, the most complex workflow is meant to streamline those tasks, improve your productivity, and ensure that everyone who's involved in that process knows exactly what to do and when to do it. So, for example, let's take a look at an IT resolution workflow, bringing it back to a corporate sense or an organizational sense. The start of my workflow might be when that ticket is actually created. Someone has an issue, they're taking the time to report it, they're going to document that, and now work is coming into my organization or to my team. The next step of my workflow might be assessing that ticket to understand the nature of the issue, including the severity, maybe categorizing that issue, maybe taking the time to understand any systems that might be affected or the equipment and assigning it a priority or category, for lack of a better term. Once that priority is assigned, maybe I might take some type of action depending on the criticality of that ticket. If it's a high priority ticket, okay, I might have some other steps that are involved in that workflow to get it through to resolution. Same thing for if it was medium or low. So taking action is then the next step. This might also involve troubleshooting, getting on the line with the user, applying fixes, replacing hardware, you name it. Those are the things that we want to have documented and how they're going to be handled once we begin taking action. Maybe as part of my workflow, every action taken regarding resolving that ticket, it's documented so that I have a good paper trail in the ticketing system. Maybe we want to flesh that out a bit more and say the ticket has to include all the details of the troubleshooting steps, all the times we may have resolved and reopened the ticket, the time spent resolving the issue. All those things are things that we want to consider when we're mapping out, when we start putting pen to paper and mapping out what this process should look like. And we might do some follow up. So, in cases where further action is required or more follow up is required, that's something that we would want to document and make sure that we assign responsibility to members of the team so that everyone knows who's responsible for performing that function. Same thing with any updates that need to happen in subsequent interactions. We all want to make sure that we update that ticket accordingly. And last but not least, I always encourage teams to look for feedback as ways that they can improve. It's very important that your mechanism, whatever that process flow is, you want to know whether or not it works. Plain and simple. The best way to do that is by soliciting that feedback and being very ardent about getting your stakeholders or team members, whomever is involved in making sure that process is successful, make sure that you ask them whether or not there are ways in which it can be improved. It's going to help pay off in the long run and help you identify any reoccurring issues and make improvements that better support that process. So, workflows can be visualized in many different ways. And depending on the complexity of the task or that process, you want to make sure that you pick a route or you pick a way of documenting that workflow in a way that's easily understood by the people that are going to be working that process. So, whether or not it's a process map, if it's a flow chart, checklist, written procedures, SOPs, whatever you call it, it's got to be something that is easily accessible, easily understandable, and can be easily executed. So let's switch gears a bit and talk about why a workflow is important. And I think we already understand why a bit just through the just by virtue of the cake analogy, as well as the IT example, right? The IT ticket resolution. Imagine if I threw a whole bunch of ingredients into a pan, put it in the oven, and said I was baking a cake. I might not necessarily have the right ingredients in place. I surely didn't follow a process or any steps. I didn't take any dependencies into consideration. I just threw everything into a bowl and just said, here I go. Imagine what eating that would taste like. I would probably have to call the health department on myself. It would be chaos. Same thing with our IT example. If I just, let's say I had a whole bunch of critical tickets coming in, but instead of having any standard process or any way of even just saying, hey, here's how I'm going to evaluate the work coming in, I just focused on things that were low priority, or I let things kind of sit in a queue for weeks on end because maybe I don't have any established SLA. I don't have anything in place to really address the way that work should be carried out when this process is initiated. Really, I don't even have a process at that point. And so that's why we want to get to the point of having a standardized way of making sure that our business flows. And so when you think about a workflow, it's the mainstay of your business. And it matters because it helps promote efficiency by making sure that you're eliminating redundancies. You've taken out and you've considered what might be effective or ineffective work, and you're eliminating any unnecessary steps in your process. Another thing that you can consider when you think about why workflows are important is that they help you maintain consistency. So I know when I initiate a ticket or when a ticket comes into my organization, we are going to follow these specific steps every single time. We have thought about what steps are important if we have a high impact ticket, if we have a medium impact ticket, or if we have a low impact ticket. And this standardized manner, following this standardized set of steps, is critical so that I can deliver every single time. I'm not questioning whether or not we're doing the right thing. We've discussed this in detail, and we have a sequence that we can follow every single time to meet the needs of my customer or my team, the organization. It doesn't matter. All I know is that I am doing the right thing because we have taken the time to flesh it out. Let's talk about transparency. So it's really interesting sometimes, and I've been in this situation before. I have worked with others that have been in this situation. When you don't have a workflow in place, you cannot adequately explain the way that you do work. Ultimately boils down to you don't have a transparent way of communicating how decisions were made, how work is done to members of your team, to your stakeholders, to other business leaders. You're just in limbo. And it's so important, especially when you have team members in place, you have stakeholders in place. It's important that your team members and your stakeholders can see who is responsible for what and when. If you cannot adequately explain your work, if you cannot explain how we get from point A to point B, it is very important and very critical, especially when you consider earning the trust of those people that you work with and maintaining that trust, that you have good standards in place, period. So then that also brings me around to the point of accountability. And so, as project managers, business leaders, business owners, it's very important to have a defined workflow that makes it very crystal clear on who is responsible for each aspect of the process. And when I think about accountability, I want to be very clear. We're not talking about accountability for the sake of penalizing someone, right? Accountability in a workflow, it serves as the checks and balance system for keeping everyone on the same page and making sure that things don't fall through the cracks. How often does it happen, or has it happened, even just in your day-to-day life, where you might make an assumption, well, this has got to get done, but I think this person's going to take care of it, or that person's going to take care of it, and then down the road, you realize nothing has happened at all because that accountability, that checks and balance system was not in place. Keep everyone on the same page, build in that transparency like we talked about before, and you're definitely going to be well on your way to the next piece, which is scalability. So this really rounds out the top reasons that I am such an advocate for making sure that you understand your workflow, especially before you start bringing technology into place, because no amount of technology is going to help you with being able to scale a process that is broken. It's not. So making sure that you have a well thought out process, you have your checks and balances in place, that's going to help you and make it easier to scale your operation without losing control of the operation because you've standardized it, as well as the quality aspect of it too. So let's talk about planning workflows before tech adoption. Going back to my cake analogy, there is no way possible that I am going to decide to bake a cake and pull out a frying pan, right? The workflow that I am suggesting does not match the tool that I want to use. And it's very important to understand that you can't do it in reverse. No amount of tool, no platform, no anything, software, whatever you want to call it, is going to fix a process that has not been fleshed out or that is broken. I feel like a broken record saying that, but this is the painful part. And when I say painful, I don't mean that it has to be something that you dread, but it's more so putting in that work up front so then you have a really good glide path to successfully growing that process should you determine that there's a need for that. Now that you understand the basics, it's time to put this knowledge into action. So I encourage you, take the time today. Start thinking about workflows within your organization, within your business, or within your team. Think about how you get from point A to point B, how that work is completed. Okay, how it comes in, how you handle it, how you complete it. If you want to learn more about creating effective workflows, or maybe you might need some help with process mapping implementation, don't hesitate to reach out to us at the Intelligent Project Manager. At the end of the day, I want to see you succeed, and this is the first step in getting there. So I hope this added value. I really appreciate you letting me speak with you about this tonight, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.